Hi, looks like we are live. Hi, folks. Coach Bill here. I'm doing this for the first time, so please bear with me. This is my first attempt at using YouTube and the ability for YouTube Studio to go live. So, wanted to run a test here. I've had some folks that have asked me some questions online. Have sent me some PMs, and I thought, hey, I should use this opportunity to sort of put these two things together to be able to practice live streaming and answer some questions. So Q&A is a perfect idea. So I'm going to try it. Here goes. First off, today is June 19th. So I just wanted to say happy Juneteenth to all my African American friends. Tremendous day. Very excited that this holiday is getting traction and is well received. And I think it's long overdue. And I'm really happy. And I hope this continues, that we recognize this important day in American history. Also, today happens to be Happy Father's Day. So happy Father's Day to all my friends out there. A ton of great men that I know, great fathers. Happy Father's Day to my own father as well. Probably not watching this. He's probably out on the farm working, but I've already sent my messages, and I'm sure he's getting messages from my brother and his granddaughters as well. So. Okay, folks, let's get into it. Let me get into the first question. The first one, this question, by the way, we're just doing these randomly MMA questions I've received from three different media sources, my friends on Instagram, Facebook, and Reddit. So we'll start with the one on Reddit. Sorry. Let's start with the one from Instagram. So this one came to me from my friend Nick Bachholt. Nick's one of my jiu-jitsu students. Nick asked me here, when the fight goes to the ground, what elements do you look for in order to prioritize striking or grappling in XYZ scenario? Okay, great question. As always, there's rarely definitives and definite things here. You can't always say, well, you should always do this and you should always do that, right? Just like everything in life it depends, and that's one of my favorite answers. People will ask me and they'll be like, let's keep talking, let's find out, what's the context. When the fight goes to the ground, what elements do I look for to prioritize? Control, absolutely. Control is my primary. So when the fight goes to the ground, I need to get in control of this situation as to avoid the scramble. The scramble is physically draining, puts me in a bad position. When I think of immediately, a scramble is a fairly neutral position, which means things can go bad for me. If I got the fight to the ground and I was loose in my controls, loose in my grips, or the situation that allowed me to take the ground. Maybe I really didn't have deep overhooks or tight underhooks or clinch, things like that, and we hit the ground where everything is loose. I don't want to put myself where I'm on the bottom position. They get head height, top position up over me, and then begin to look at my limbs. Maybe my neck suddenly becomes a good target to be attacked, or I start getting the ground and pound and punch to myself. So all those things are bad for me, and I don't like. I like to keep myself in the winning position in the fight. So as soon as the fight hits the ground, I want to get in control. I want to get dominant position. I look to get tight control on the hips, on the hands. Look to get wrist controls. Look to get my collar ties or my Nelson grips, whatever the case was be. Now if I might be reading into your question a little bit, but do I prioritize striking or grappling? Maybe, and what am I looking for the finish? I would say I would immediately look to once control has been established, and I'll put this in the context of MMA. I look to begin to create damage first. So I like to prioritize creating damage and striking, then submissions. And the reason is because of that is a sport specific MMA mindset for me. If I don't get the finish, then the match could get stood up right away, or we could get reset back in the stage, or maybe I don't win the round if I can't get the choke or get the shoulder lock from the top position, right? So if the fight hits the ground, I want to make sure that I am using tactics that align to the scoring criteria of MMA rounds to make sure that I'm getting my credit for the work that got the fight to the ground. So I'm right away, I'm getting control. Then I'm going to start to create damage. I'm going to start punching. I'm going to start mixing up grips, looking at strikes to the head, strikes to the body, looking to soften them up, looking to keep them off balance and on the defensive. I don't want to throw strikes that are going to put me in a bad context. Just kind of case in point, the classic, you're in a side control position and you use your far hand. If your far hand starts striking, of course, you give up the underhook, which is primarily used to keep the opponent down, pinned to the mat. So if you get too carried away when you're striking, you're giving away too much control. That could be bad, right? So you want to keep control, but then I want to start launching into striking. Now, as the opponent is under that pressure of the strikes, they start to feel the pressure, both the physical pressure and the psychological pressure of the strikes to improve their position, right? Their corner is yelling things to encourage them. The fans are both their friends are yelling them, get up. Your fans are yelling, yeah, kick his butt. Your fans are encouraging you to keep damaging them. They're going to feel lots of pressure, and that's when you're going to be, if you've gotten the top control and you're throwing effective strikes, you're in the driver's seat. Now your fight IQ will let you set up submissions, we're going to use that sophisticated ground and pound to get into the positions. Many times I've punched my way up, and just as they've reached up the frame, that was sort of the perfect head and arm choke setup, right? Or they have tried to shrimp and tried to regard in, and maybe that was the key after a couple successful hammer fists, and they've turned up and sort of exposed. They've turned up on one side and exposed an arm. That was the time in which you spun around and got a Kimura grip, or maybe you went and took the back exposure for the choke or an arm bar. So these things definitely have an integral relationship between how you use your strikes and you work into the choke, and that's the Khabib, the smash kind of mentality in there. And you look at that and it's like, well, that wasn't Khabib's only tool on there. Khabib had really good solid jiu-jitsu, and he was able to use that control, damage, and then submission kind of path to victory. And it's very, very hard to deal with. As someone may avoid a submission, they're still in a bad position and still continue to receive damage. Or maybe someone is in a bad position, they start receiving damage, maybe they start to get into an underhook. You're able, because you were focused on a control, to now recognize where they were likely to go, and you're able to stay a step ahead of them and move off to a different advantageous position and still dominate the fight. So hope that answers the question, Nick. They're definitely related, but think control first. Get the fight and get into dominant position. That'll usually give you an advantage, and use that advantage to keep up, get your scores, create damage, create pressure on the person to force mistakes. Okay, let's go to Reddit. Shout out and thank you to my friends over at the Reddit forum, MMA Academy. It's a fairly new forum on Reddit, but it's really cool folks who are not just MMA fans, but most of the folks that are on this are training in MMA or training in combat sports. And they often ask lots of great questions. Many of them are amateurs in their career and are looking for advice Some really good questions here, and I saw these this morning, and I thought, man, these are going to be like, I didn't want to put too much overthought. I didn't want to kind of cultivate some um, pre predetermined answer, but I did see there were 7 or 8 questions. Let's get into those here. Dookie1481 asks, what proportion of excuse me, what proportion of striking to grappling specific classes do you recommend for a relative newcomer? Roughly 7 months training, both BJJ and striking. I'm a hobbyist that probably won't compete in MMA. Okay. What specific proportion? So I think if I read between the lines, you're asking about, sort of your weekly, your macro training cycle. How much striking do you do? How much grappling do you do? Good question. And thank you, by the way, for giving me a little bit of insight and said 7 months of training in both striking and jiu-jitsu. And you mentioned that you're a hobbyist, that you probably won't compete in MMA. And that's nothing wrong with that. Training for yourself, training for life is a noble effort too. So I definitely support that. Well, I would imagine. I'm going to make an assumption, or at least I will. I'll try not to make too big of an assumption in you, but I'll use my own gym as an instance. I would recommend that if you're a hobbyist, you're probably training 5 days a week, six sessions a week maximum. Now, I'm not factoring in any other strength and conditioning or any other activities that you may do, but I'm going to say that as a hobbyist, I would probably recommend that you're probably training 5 times a week or less, and that's definitely fine. You can make lots of progress with that goal. So, what is your proportion of striking to grappling? I'll give you. Let's see. I would say that if you're training 5 days a week, your 3 classes in jiu-jitsu, or your 2 classes in striking, or if you have a slight preference, is fine. So roughly that 50-50 split. I think there's absolutely nothing wrong with that at first. I would give you another alternative to consider. This is one that I've had a lot of success with, particularly when people in your instance, as hobbyists, tell me that their weekly volume is a little bit limited. Like let's say that in your instance, you can only train 4 days a week, just due to time constraints, maybe family concerns, job things. You're a bit limited, and they say, "Well, Coach, what would you do?" And I say, I would recommend a route that's focuses on some periodization, meaning I would train. If you had 4 sessions per week, I would train. I would take maybe a 2-month block. And for the next 8 weeks, I would probably train jiu-jitsu 3 times a week and striking once a week. And then after 8 weeks, I would flip that around, and then I would go to striking 3 times a week and my jiu-jitsu once a week. And what that does is that gives you a block of focus that will allow you to actually increase the skills of the priority. In this case, if I recommended 3 times a week of striking, while training enough to just maintain some of the amount of jiu-jitsu skills that you have, so you won't completely degrade or backslide on all the work you've done. Now, with only one training a week, you're not going to make big improvements, but that's okay. The idea there is to maintain some of the skills you've earned, so that way when you flip over, you'll be kind of doing the same way with your striking. You'll keep just enough of training aspect during the week that you'll still be trying to maintain prevent backslide while you're working on focus on gaining and acquiring technique and new skills. Now, as a gym owner, I can tell you, looking at my own class, the way my own program is structured, I offer 5, let's see. I offer class technical lessons instruction 5 days a week, and on Saturdays I have 2 open classes. I have an open pad work session for my fighters, and I have an open grappling session for those that want to practice their jiu-jitsu skills. Of those 5 classes per week, I offer 2 striking classes, 2 wrestling classes, one focused on the integration between skills in the open, shoot boxing skills, as I often hear them called now, in which you're integrating your wrestling skills, your ability to shoot and take people down to the mat, integrated those with striking skills. And I also do a class. The second class in the week is focused on fence wrestling skills. So both offense and defense, clinching, dirty boxing, the nature of dealing and wrestling with people in our environment on the cage wall, which is a critical skill for MMA. So I've got 2 striking classes a week, 2 wrestling classes a week, and 1 jiu-jitsu class. And then on Saturdays we offer an additional striking pad work session, which is sort of freestyle. You come in and you want to work on a specific aspect of your kicks. You can request that. Of course, we'll hold pads, or we'll work on scenarios. In jiu-jitsu class, of course, if you've got a particular niche that you want to drill on or work on, focus on, or maybe you just want to come in and get extra rolls, that's the ability. So just to let you know that as a coach, I try to give you options. So my fighters could come in theory 3 times a week and work on striking, and they could come in 3-4 times a week and work on grappling skills, including jiu-jitsu and wrestling, kind of mixing those together. But and the things that I mentioned here don't include my Brazilian jiu-jitsu classes, which I think are completely separate. Really, just talking about my MMA specific classes here. So I hope that answers your question. I really think it's if you're new to it and 7 months in, you're looking to acquire the skills. It really just depends on your schedule and having fun, staying mentally and kind of staying engaged in the work you're doing, and you're developing. You're finding those little pieces of training that you're working on. Have those questions, talking to your coaches, and if you're doing each of those things a few times a week, you're going to make progress. So I think, by the way, I think. I don't want to go down a rabbit hole because hopefully we'll see if anybody else asks these questions about integrating skills, which I'm sure they do. We can talk about that, but I think right now, if you're starting out 7 months in, definitely that's the novice world, in my opinion. Cross training, jiu-jitsu and striking skills, boxing or Muay Thai is awesome. You're off to a great start. Everything is up from zero. So acquire the skills, work with your coaches, gi, no gi, you're on your way. So hope that answered the question. Thank you very much for asking. I really appreciate it. Next question. Here we go. This also comes from Reddit. Sandwhale123 asks, how fit should I be before I'm ready to join an MMA gym? Awesome. This is a question I bet just about every gym owner that I know gets all the time. And I've definitely had people reach out to me through our website and look to schedule classes, and then not make it into their trial class because they were racked with this personal sense that they weren't ready to start MMA training. I think the ultimate answer is that just the fact that you want to come into the MMA gym means you're ready, and you should not hesitate to get to the gym and begin your training ASAP. There isn't a coach alive that is going to shame you or tell you that you aren't ready, regardless of your conditioning. The mental side, the fact that you want to begin training is by far more important than your physical conditioning. Your physical conditioning will adapt. You will get better as you keep training. There's no doubt about that. You're going to improve. So just as I had mentioned, you're starting out. The only way is up. You will make progress as you come and train. Now, again, I'm going to try to read the context between the lines, the things that aren't said here. If you're asking about fitness before you join the gym, you're probably worried about your fitness before you join the gym. So there's ways to mitigate that, and you're probably already aware of that. I think the two easiest answers are things to you that are absolutely within your control. You don't have to go out and get an extra gym. You don't have to get another membership. You don't have to get special fancy equipment. Don't have to buy heart rate monitors or any HRV readiness tools. I'm a big proponent of those things. By all means, don't get me wrong. I love all those things I mentioned, but you don't need them if your question is just how do I get fitter. And let's start with the big one, in my opinion, and that's your aerobic conditioning. Your aerobic conditioning is huge for MMA, for your general health. I highly recommend that if there's one area that you can work on your own time, and will greatly contribute to your abilities in the gym and out of the gym. You're included in your own general health, would be the improvement of your aerobic fitness. Don't underestimate. I don't want to go into the scientific side. There's too many incredible experts out there who have already have laid the foundation for this work. But your aerobic system constitutes the vast majority of your energy production, and I mean that really including combat sports as well. It's incredible how much if you look at the energy profile that the aerobic system contributes. And just think about how high your heart rate has to get before your anaerobic systems begin to start contributing energy, and the explosions and lactic and lactic. Think about how much of your aerobic system has already contributed before they begin to supply the majority of the energy there, and you see that during the nature of the combat sports that we're constantly riding right around that anaerobic threshold zone. But when it comes to your overall fitness, here's an idea that I'd like to that I like to mention or reference to new students. And one of the things I like to remind those folks is that don't worry about your fitness as far as like your sparring rounds or the bag rounds or pad rounds or jiu-jitsu rounds. Those things will come in. Those things will definitely be a major contributor as far as like the sport specific training. While you are getting pads and shadow boxing, while you're doing some sparring, you're going to get a very good sport specific training while you're actually at the gym. But you can work on your fitness and actually be ready for those energies. Meaning that if you think about your MMA training, your class is probably anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes, maybe even 120 minutes, maybe even 2-hour classes, depending on your gym. Just making some assumptions here. So 90 minutes. That's a long class, and most of the 90 minutes of energy you're going to exert a couple times a week are going to come from your aerobic system. So once again, more reason for you to have a good aerobic system. So that during class, when you need to use the anaerobic energy to explode into your kicks and your punches and hit the heavy bags and hit the pads and do the sparring, hit the takedown sessions, get into the rolls and the scrambles and the positional, the guard passing, you'll have your energy, your anaerobic energy you'll have that reserve because your body has gotten better and better at having a robust aerobic system. So you'll have more gas tank, as we say in sort of nomenclature. Just you'll have that ability to go through the rounds, take a break, change gear, get the water break, keep class. Okay, the next 30 minutes, maybe it's a technical role. You have the energy to keep those roles and those skills up. Practicing those with your partner, you'll be able to do those things with that mindfulness and that intensity and the energy, and you won't be sort of gassed out already. You won't be looking for. You won't have already overexpended yourself with use too much anaerobic fuel to power yourself through the training. So when it comes to, particularly as we usually do, the last 30 minutes of class, or maybe the last 45 minutes of class, when the higher intensity, when the sparring usually begins, you'll have those reserves ready to go. So, okay. Once again, thank you. Thanks for the question. Good question. And when I see a lot, so I'm more than happy to answer that, and hopefully some other people can see that and know that there's this fitness that you should be in should be to of course should be to you're ready now mentally, and that's maybe the most important thing. You'll get into class and then you'll get in better shape. So okay. Here we go. And this next question come from Zenak, was related to that first question. They ask, how necessary are MMA specific classes in order to compete as opposed to BJJ and striking? In MMA specific classes, how do they focus on bridging the gap between BJJ and striking? Great question. And that's one I'm particularly passionate about. One, I would, this is something that how do I, this is one thing that's really been a passion of mine and has driven a lot of my career, a lot of my own personal goals in MMA. And I'll start by my background. Back in 1995, I was was competing in wrestling, and I was actually recovering at the time I saw it. I was actually recovering from an injury. I had blown my ACL out that particular year in wrestling, during my wrestling season, and was rehabbing and recovering. I went to visit my friends in Baltimore who were down at Towson University, and it happened to be the World Wushu Championships of that year. And in that year, I got to see a format of kickboxing called Sanshou kickboxing. And that it blew my mind because what I saw on display there were kickboxing for wrestlers. It was this, these guys boxing, throwing brutal leg kicks, body kicks, head kicks. And they were fighting on this lei platform, sort of a, in my first impression, right? It looks like a low platformed boxing ring with no poles or ropes. And then in the mixture of the environment, they could push each other off the platform, and when the kicks would be thrown, they would grab the kicks and then elevate or lift. Again, coming from a wrestling background, I just saw treetops and leg giant single legs and major lifts and throws. And as soon as I saw it, I just became all consumed and said, "This is kickboxing for wrestlers. This is what I want to do." I've been looking for some version of what to do after my wrestling career at this time, and I found this. I had thought that I had briefly dabbled in traditional martial arts, knowing weapons and kata and things like that, and I just wasn't. It was cool. Don't get me wrong. I think everybody of my generation has probably had some exposure to the traditional martial arts, and I had gained incredible flexibility and had this deep cultural education in the history of these Asian countries, but I was missing that competitive fire, and the Sanshao kickboxing was awesome. And what I immediately saw was that the countries that were kicking butt at this event were the dominant wrestling countries that I had already had a lot of respect for. The Russians, the Iranians, the Egyptians, the strong dominant. These folks. And what I also saw, just in it's sort of, again, a little bit of verification, was that there was a wide discrepancy between the people that were there for the wushu, the kind of adults in silk pajamas doing flowery, beautiful, graceful things, and then the fighters. The fighters were these kind of cauliflowered, broken-nosed goons who were there, and you could tell that they were there for business. And it was like, these are my people. these are the wrestlers. These are the guys that I wanted to associate with. And so I'd quickly found out that unfortunately for me, that Sanshao was an awesome but fairly niche sport. So I had to move to go find the nearest qualified instructor, and he happened to be somebody that was certified at the world level and was a major referee in Sanshao. So obviously someone very skilled and one of the most knowledgeable people at that time on the East Coast of the United States. I began to go train Sanshao. But Sanshao taught me, and learning Sanshao, and I already had a strong boxing background in wrestling, so it was learning how to kick. But what I really learned from my experience in Sanshao was learning how to kick and learning how to strike, I should say, learning how to strike people that want to take you down, and learning how to take people down that want to strike you. And both of those things on their own are very complicated or tricky. It's when two people are just wrestling each other, their options are so much more limited. You have so much more. The more experienced you are, the more cognitive you have to get much more detailed and refined about what you see. When you're trying to strike each other and there's no takedowns, as you know, many other striking subsets have that, right? There are many things you can do and get away with. You tend to be a lot more kicky, a lot more upright. Your defense is focused on blocking strikes from landing, not opposed to losing your base or balance and getting taken down to the ground. So when you mix those two things together, you now get a challenge. Try to take somebody down. Try to shoot a double leg on somebody that can sprawl and throw uppercuts or throw kicks at you. Throw kicks at your legs the minute you stop. Or try to wrestle somebody. Try to kick somebody who's actively trying to get you down to the ground, and you'll see that these things are very challenging, very complicated. Create a really new sport, and that's what made Sanshao a beautiful problem, and I immediately fell in love, and I think that was my entrance really into MMA. And throughout most of my career, I came up in an environment where it was, "Hey, we do MMA." I'm like, "Oh, cool, thank you. I'm trying to get into MMA," and I would join class or work out with these guys, and class would be they would do Muay Thai, or class would be they would do jujitsu, and then maybe the last 30 minutes of their class session, the jujitsu guys might throw on some MMA gloves. I'm like, okay, we're gonna do MMA now, and they would spar with some strikes thrown in. As part of just the sparring part, no part of the actual technical part of class ever considered MMA. In fact, it was probably in that time, I would say 90% of the time we had the gis on. So we had to take off the gi and then put on the MMA gloves. And then we were Valley Tudo fighters. We were trying to fight like the guys we were all emulating with the guys we wanted to be like. Or many times I would go to the Muay Thai class, and when it came to sparring, it would be no, let's do sparring, but don't do any takedowns. Like, okay, well, that's I'm I'm a wrestler, so that's kind of a little bit tough. I mean, I'll use my boxing here, but as you know, it creates it's a different sport, and it's a sort of a different goal. So they're thinking, boy, your Muay Thai isn't very good. I'm like, well, I'm not really a Muay Thai guy, and I'm not really trying to be. That's not why I'm here. I thought this was MMA class. And so what I realized were that in those early days, we were doing lots of cross training, but we weren't really integrating strikes. We weren't doing MMA specific training. That led me, when I opened up my own school in 2005, to recognize the importance of training for your sport. And my sport was MMA, and I needed to make sure that I was training for my sport, and so that my striking was focused on how do we strike, and what are the circumstances that will do that image, and what is your wrestling for MMA. How you're trying to wrestle people, grapple people, you're dealing with the cage, you're dealing with dirty boxing, holding and hitting, clinching, and we're dealing with, and finally, we're dealing with grappling on the ground with strikes. Try to play guard against somebody that's trying to punch you in the head, vice versa, right? These things are pretty cliche now, but at the time, it was important, and I found a very frustrating lack of the integration of skills. I felt that people are still, and it's much hasn't changed in this way. People were in 2022, and folks are still what I consider cross training. They're training wrestling, they're training jujitsu class, they're training Muay Thai or boxing classes, and then they're trying to figure out how to be MMA fighters. And what I consider, and the biggest difference I see is that to me, those are the foundation arts. Those are the arts that which we as MMA practitioners, we take the techniques, we take the skills from those foundation arts, but we shouldn't practice those arts continue to practice those arts as our primary. And I'll say primary here, meaning that our primary focus should be on using those skills in the context of MMA as our primary training. And then I think for the intermediate and for the advanced folks, now we need to look at the people that are really masters of those particular skills, who are usually in a sport that favors those. Let's say you want to improve your kicking, you better go to a coach with a great Muay Thai background, or maybe Taekwondo background for that nature, to get that experience in. But as a general, as a primary, if I want to be an MMA athlete, then my focus better be on MMA skills. What does that mean? I think that there needs to be a few things. I think you really need to look at the skills you need in MMA instead of thinking about just jiu-jitsu or striking. I think you need to look at how to strike against grapplers, how to look down. I think grapplers need to look at how to use striking to set up takedowns. I think you need to deal with or work on the skills involved in cage fighting, offense and defense. I think you need to look at jiu-jitsu as a little bit more of when it comes to grappling. I think you're looking at you're mixing with striking, whether it be offense and defense, receiving. Are you on the receiving end of that ground and pound? And how does your jiu-jitsu change? Are you on the offensive side? How does the control, going back to the top pressure, the smash form? How do these things impact your training? Maybe you need some work like and not a bad thing. I actually think he's a amazingly clever guy. The Derek Lewis, the Just Get Up. He's completely amazingly colorful guy, but there's surprisingly a lot of good solid technique in his get-ups. And I think getting up is a major skill in MMA that's definitely is practiced by the professionals at this level. We have to practice recognizing when you're in a bad spot and not remaining on your back in the guard, certain to lose the round unless you're able to catch a submission attempt from the ground. So you have to work about what are the skills that are different in MMA as a guard player as opposed to getting up. So get ups are another one aspect of this. So integration is critical for me. I think it's really good. I think how do they focus on bridging the gap between jiu-jitsu and striking? I think the answer is you have to train properly. If you look, you won't find the answer. You won't find your answer in jiu-jitsu class or in striking class, and that's why you need to find the MMA coach who has the experience in these major categories with these foundation arts, who has the experience, who has integrated them together, who has worked with other experts. Maybe he has a coaching, a support coaching team with them to help you apply these if you want to do these at a higher level and be successful in MMA. So thanks, Enoch. That's a tough question. I feel like clearly, as you can see, I could probably rant and talk about that. That's a deep subject for me, and one I've spent a lot of time on and trying to I'm a visual thinker. I see everything as a picture to me, and I've always kind of mused that MMA is one of these sports where folks will train rugby 3 days a week. And then ultimate frisbee twice a week to work on forward passing and receiving skills, and then go try to play football on Sunday, and then wonder why there were gaps in their game. It's you should play football 6 days a week, right? Just my opinion, and by all means, this is everything. I'm someone I try. How do I say it? I certainly think I've got strong opinions. I like to give these things a lot of thought and analysis, but at the same time, I try to keep an open mind, and I completely understand that many of my views, particularly on martial arts, are very anecdotal, very subjective, very very much based on my own experience, and not everybody will agree. As many examples as I might give to justify my position, somebody could go out there and give you examples that sort of represent their status on this, and that's more power to them. I'm not absolute in my everybody. I feel that this is the absolute only right way to do this. Everybody else is an idiot. That's the silliest thing in the world, and I can't count how many times in my own career, my own experiences, I've thought one way, and then a few years have went by, and I come back and I'm like, oh wow, I never thought of this thing or this piece or this or this view, and it changed the way. Now it didn't necessarily make polar, but it opened me, or showed me a side hatch, a new window that I hadn't seen before. That happens a lot for me in jiu-jitsu as I learn, and I try to keep current with the new games that are always coming out, the new meta, what's happening, what's on the jiu-jitsu scene. And it's often interesting for me as like kind of an old head, a guy that's been around doing the jiu-jitsu scene for over 20 years here. I look at the way we were taught and the way that my instructors thought about jiu-jitsu. Then I look at my own experience over the years, and now I see what we're looking at now, and I'm looking back, and what are the differences, or how does this change what I believe to be true? And as long as you're doing martial arts, I think you'll find those situations, and you should keep an open mind and keep adapting and learning. I can think of one of the things we're talking about, and hopefully it's one of the things I think I saw down here in the Reddit column. This was one of the things that made me think about this in particular this morning, was changes in what is happening in MMA striking. Particularly, it's something that I'm still trying to work on and understand fully, and sort of gain the insight and the details in this, because it's a subtle thing, and this goes back to the change in the distance that striking is happening in MMA. I don't want to spoil it, but we'll wait to the question. But this will kind of bring that point. Now, this is an area of what I had held to be true as like, oh, MMA fighters will fight in this range, and this is kind of the MMA range is changing as the sport goes on. So keep an open mind, because you just may learn something. Okay. All right. Abandon 3 says, I only have time for one MMA class a week. What is a good way to train at home and build some endurance? Okay. Well, Abandon, excuse me. Class once a week. Well, some training is better than no training. Some progress is better than no progress. So once a week is definitely slow, but if you are mindful, the very first thing that comes into my mind was that class once a week will give you a very small set of instructions, but you're going to have 6 more days a week to drill and think about those techniques. And I think when you're starting out, that's critical. It's not the accumulation at first of all the knowledge that will give you the most benefit. It's learning the core fundamental things that you'll learn very early in your career. If you're out of school, and say you're in a new jiu-jitsu program, or you're in a new striking program that you're working on once a week, that you can practice and become good at, and you will probably continue to apply most of those skills for the rest of your career. I think about, if what somebody's coming in class and I'm teaching them basic stance or basic guard, or maybe I'm teaching them the jab, or the jab right straight combo 1-2, right? Those things will never ever go away from their toolbox. Those will be staples. That's the screwdriver and hammer of your toolbox. So you're going to use those all the time. So you have a lot of time. You get in some focused education once a week. Keep applying those. So if you're working on striking, of course, you've got heavy bag, you've got shadow boxing, you've got a mirror. If that's you mentioned your conditioning. Lots of tools, as I mentioned earlier. One of the very first things is like, do not underestimate your ability to improve your aerobic system. Your aerobic system is incredibly adaptive. You're going to increase your aerobic fitness, increase your mitochondria production. Those are the power plants within your cells that give you energy and power. You're going to increase those. You are going to raise the ability to work, the ability the amount of work you can do under anaerobic threshold, which means that's more that keeps your aerobic system useful at a higher rate longer. So the anaerobic becomes sort of the nitrous tank that you can use when you really need to turn on those explosions. All those things are absolutely done. You can do those. There are many resources for these things. One of the keys, and this is a guy that's one of my mentors. He's been involved in my career for a very long time as a mentor, someone I've met in person probably a handful of times, but has continued to supply me with information in a very helpful way, rather. And that's Joel Jamieson, famous for 8 Weeks Out, the Ultimate MMA Conditioning Guide. Joel's an incredible guy and a leader in energy system development and knowledge. I don't think when he was making the book Ultimate MMA Conditioning back in 2011, 12, that he was what he was doing. But now I see it. So many people in so many different arts, even outside of combat sports, now come to Joel for his knowledge about energy systems, heart rate recovery, heart rate variability, these different recovery methods that he had introduced me to. And what was, I guess, incredibly beneficial for me was that Joel didn't just say, do this, do this, do this. He didn't write you a program and then hand it off. He basically showed me, here's the science. Here are the people, and these are my sources. This is, a lot of the work. I think Joel will probably be the first one to say this. Joe was really inspired by many of the Soviet research scientists, Mel Sif, Verkhoshansky, the people that were doing a lot of this work. A lot of the work that heart rate variability that's being done today is rooted in the omega wave, the work that the Soviets were doing very early on with this heart rate variability and the space race studies now that have just gotten so much easier and better to utilize with wearable technology. That there's a lot of stuff out there. I'm getting off onto a tangent, just singing Joel's praises. Guys, amazing resource for energy systems and aerobic development. He was probably one of the first people in the MMA community to talk about why you should be training the aerobic system. And then Joe, rather than just sort of bro science it out like many people would have said back in the day when they were shouting about, CrossFit, sprint, hit, do all these intervals. Joe was just, here's a medical study, here's a publisher, here's what we actually know about the human condition, and was just really sourcing this material, and it was just a wealth of material. Take advantage of it. But Joel's work probably at this point would I'm sure that it's been revisited, re-examined. Many people have probably written their own versions of these articles, but Joe had something he had written several years ago called Roadwork 2.0, and that I was really happy to see that article, because it sort of substantiated some of the things we were doing. We were doing aerobic fitness, and one of the things that we were doing. We were working, and just a breakdown of essentially what we were doing, mostly to improve in your endurance your question on endurance, aerobic endurance. We were doing cardio output, in which is roughly steady state heart rate between 130 and 150, 155 beats per minute for about 60 minutes. But the way we had broken that out in our team was we had set that up like MMA rounds. So we had set up 5-minute stations with 30-second rest breaks, and we just rotated through these stations. So we were doing various things like shadow boxing station, jump rope station, concept 2 station, airdyne bike station. Did I mention jump rope? I might have, various stations like at aerobic plyometrics. We just we sort of tested tons of these sort of low impact aerobic circuits. And we did sort of, aerobic circuit training, and in place of hard running, road work, pounding on your knees, because my knees, I'm an old man. My knees were shot. I've had multiple knee surgeries. As I mentioned, I had an ACL surgery and multiple meniscus surgeries. My knees are trashed, so I needed alternatives, and I had several fighters who also had shin splints and various dislocated or knees that had issues. So they also needed alternatives. So something that came out of that, and this is something that Joel had talked about with Roadwork 2.0. So look into that, and I'll try to put that link down below in the comment section if anybody's interested. But that's a resource that's been out there for many years and is very available and very beneficial. Okay, all right. How we doing, folks? Looks like 55 minutes. Holy cow. I talk too much. It's hard to believe I've been talking for an hour and don't even know if I've gotten through all of the questions. Okay. 1 second. I'll be right back. I want to grab a sip of water here. Okay. All right. Yoel Romero nephew. Hey, Yoel. This is a guy. So I've spoken with Yoel Romero nephew on Reddit before. I think we've even had a couple PMs, a couple questions. So thank you very much for asking another question. I really appreciate it. Here's the question. Which guard in BJJ should I prioritize for MMA? Okay, and then he asks a second question here, but I'm going to answer this one first, and then we'll break down his second question. Which guard should I prioritize in MMA? Prioritize if you are a new practitioner to jiu-jitsu. I'm going to recommend that you prioritize the closed guard first. That's probably not the answer you want to hear. Let me say that I'm a first degree jiu-jitsu black belt. So you may have said there are lots of guards, but when it comes to striking, a lot of the fancy open guards get blown away, sometimes literally, because of the lack of defense or the commitment of all four limbs to holding on and to grips and leaving the face vulnerable. I would recommend that you start with the closed guard. The closed guard is as old school jiu-jitsu as it gets. It's not the guard you want, it's the guard you need. Okay, that's really my first. When it comes to MMA guys, you need to have a guard that can save your ass, that can get you out of spots where one quote Kurt Osiander here, you done fucked up, right? You're in a terrible spot. You got mounted. You're in bottom half guard. You're in bottom side control, and you're getting the snot beat out of you. Okay, if you don't get back to a position where you can stop the damage and catch your breath, get set, protect your head, get into a good position, the fight's going to be over. Especially when it comes to amateur MMA shows where they're not going to let fights go, especially fights that have where a cut has been. A fighter got punched, got a cut above the eye, across the bridge of the nose, and blood is now pouring. Like, if you don't get the fight back into context where you can defend yourself, they're going to stop it real quick. Okay, so I highly recommend that you start with a good closed guard, because you can always come back to that. You can, from there, you can start to learn, you learn the vale tudo guard. You start to open up, the feet move up to the hips, the hands drop from the head now to the inside ties, the elbows, and the hand fighting. You can, you start to do arm drags. You start to sit up guards. You start to play the games of more advanced grapplers, but it comes back to closed guard. I think as my priority. If I had a limited time, if I was working with somebody who came in and said, "Hey, I'm a limited. I've got limited time. We've got a fight camp, 8 weeks, 6 weeks, and I'm a good striker and I'm a competent wrestler, but I don't, my jiu-jitsu's trash. What are you going to show me?" I'm probably going to show them the classic old school sort of punch block, inside position. And then we're going to talk about different various grips and versions of moving from the close guard that are going to allow them to get to technical stand up and get back to their feet. So once they secure their position, get the heck up off the bottom and improve your position. And I think that is the area. That second part is where most of the modern open guards that I would recommend to better grapplers, my blue belts, my purple belts, all of these guys are going to play guards that allow them to quickly sort of transition, talking about a butterfly hook, talking about a half guard, half butterfly, the type of things that allow them, because they're able to sort of play guard, and if they can't sweep, they come up out of the top. They come up out of the position. So critical for MMA is that you're not forced to remain in a bottom position too long that you can't defend, right? If you're in a bottom position, you have to have your hands have to be at a position which neutralize the opponent's ability to damage you. Okay. So hopefully that answered your question. Practice your close guard. Get good at your close guard first, and then you will be able to move on to more adaptive, open, various jiu-jitsu. Okay. Now, the second question, this goes back to my earlier question. Very, very good question, by the way. You're touching on something here that's very, very modern, very current. MMA striking feels like it has a lot more hand fighting with long guards and the lead hand than boxing does, especially with southpaw and orthodox matchups. Plenty of examples from MMA. But see Max Holloway for orthodox, both hands outstretched often, or McGregor for southpaw, almost looks like he's welcoming an opponent for a hug. First, why are MMA fighters so loose with their guard with wavy arms compared to boxers? Second, what do I need to win the hand fighting game? Okay, now this, thank you for asking this question, because this question is really getting to the heart of a new meta. And I think that we will be talking about this as far as MMA coaching and MMA techniques and trends in the next future and over the next few years, because I definitely see that this is we're on the cusp of this wave and this change, and I definitely want to give credit here. This was just hear that, a little bit of a thunderstorm out there. This is pretty typical if it's 5 o'clock or almost getting there here in Central Florida. So that means we're going to get a wave of thunderstorms coming in the afternoon. Sorry, tangent. Squirrel. Back to the question. What we're seeing is a change in the distance that MMA striking is sort of held in place, and it's really interesting to understand what's happening. To give you the context, I'll sort of start from the position, I guess, coming from a boxing background, the range of exchange, because we were limited to only using your hands to score, you had to get into a range where you could hit and be hit with essentially one step. And so the result, and this goes back to what we know, is toe to toe. The range at which we were fighting was roughly one footstep away from the other person's foot. And so there was that in and out, that sewing machine classic, in and out of the jab and the exchanges. When you got toe to toe, you were suddenly able to make your right straight or your right cross or your lead hook. You started to reach them, but if you wanted to get one step back defensively, right, we were right that one step away, and that was the range at which you can box successfully. However, that's also the exact same range in which you can wrestle successfully, right? If you are toe to toe, you can with no problem. I can reach out and grab a single leg. That's the range I need to get to. And now I am being toe to toe. Once I can grab your leg, I can then finish through that drive. I can step up now that I've acquired your knee, or I've gotten the underhook. I can step one more step closer, get hip to hip or chest to chest with you, and now finish or control your core, right? So that's not the range, of course, in which you want to fight MMA at, because if you're trying to box and the other person is trying to wrestle, there's not enough time to be able to defend the wrestling successfully. So what kind of change there was, of course, we moved back to the kickboxing range, the Muay Thai range specifically. I'll say the Muay Thai range, and that's where I think we've for most of the time, maybe from the generation that once the wrestlers came into the early UFCs, that we said, "Whoa, big fella, we need to get some space. These guys, their shots are too quick. These guys are coming from Division I backgrounds, former Olympic champions. Their shots are faster than we can handle. If I'm in the middle of throwing a combination, you're too fast to be able to adapt and recognize and defend. So we need to get them back out." And we started fighting, when Muay Thai and MMA, boxing, striking, wrestling, we were fighting at the Muay Thai range. And now the Muay Thai range gives a little bit more step, but it also is a range. And I think that this again comes from the foundational art, that the range is really best serving the sport of Muay Thai in exchange for exchange. And because the kick and the knees are the predominant score of Muay Thai, you needed to be in a range where you could land those and block those with sort of just one step. So now when we measure the distance in those kickboxing exchanges, we see that there's sort of two steps apart now. And the step is they're one step apart with the extended feet. And that was the range in which I think we really kept up. And that was we recognized that Muay Thai was the predominant kickboxing art, and Dutch Muay Thai, I'll also caveat that in, but we'll get to Dutch a little bit about Dutch Muay Thai. And boxing, and now used for MMA as our primary sparts, our foundation arts. And what we are seeing now, or what the problems are that now arose, or how MMA changed from that, is that wrestlers got better with striking. And so now wrestlers got more creative, and we're beginning to understand and get into being able to initiate kickboxing sequences and then flow through into very clean takedowns. I think when I think of these guys, I think of the popularity, the popularity that being able to switch. You see so much more over the last 5-6 years than you had at any time before MMA. Saw fighters fluidly transition from orthodox to southpaw, and as they circled, they could create new angles, and they used that both to keep their opponents changing with their striking techniques. But when they also you realized that by by switching my stance, throwing a strike, getting a getting a commitment to a block. They also gave up a new angle for wrestling. Fighters, some of like T.J. Dillashaw and some of those fighters, Dominic Cruz, really changed the game with the fluidity on the mix, fighting like MMA guys now, not fighting like wrestlers and kickboxers, but fighting like the sport of MMA. Brought a beautiful changes and transitions, and then where we kind of take that to the modern era. And what we see to the modern era is we we gotta back up. We gotta take one more step back. So this is the new, and this is what was happening. And this was a bit where I could see it, but I couldn't say I wasn't smart enough or progressive enough to define it. Well, we're further away now. And I was like, well, what does that mean? And I couldn't really understand, or I really didn't see it articulated until I saw George Hickman from the Hickman Brothers in Thailand, Hickman Brothers Wrestling guys. And George had on a recent video he put out, I believe on Dynamic Striking, put out something, and he sort of said that, kind of explained that the new stance, which is gaining popularity, is this knuckle to knuckle stance. So if you were in your fight stance and stood out with your fist extended, and the other fighter was standing there and they have their stance extended, and your hands are fist bumped there, that's looked down now. And that's where the modern MMA stance is being held. And that's sort of the new trench line. And that's an interesting puzzle, because you look at that, and now you try to, if you don't create any kind of feint or fake, and you try to step in with any kind of strike, you jab or you throw a round kick, or you try to throw any kind of combination, I'm easily able to pick up and recognize what your attempt is at that distance and move. And I've got a lot of options, and I'm a more educated, more talented striker, and I'm able to read and circle, and then, or maybe I read and then counter what you came in, because you're not able to really take advantage of that distance anymore, and you certainly can't wrestle from there. And that so now you're really making the wrestlers commit to their striking first, and that's, if you want to beat a wrestler, that's a great tactic, right? This brings me back to that original point. Who fights this way? What does this new meta really mean? And for me, it's exciting, or it's interesting. I love this change, because the people that are fighting at this range, who are really good at fighting from this range, are those karate guys. The blitz, the ability to get me to at the far range. It's this double bridge, this ability to feint or fake me at the outside, throw that anchor step, throw the raise the inside knee, raise the leg, get me to stop and pause, just flinch or commit to what I believe is a perceived attack, for you to close. Then now you'll be able to enter in with 1-2, or you'll be able to enter in, one kick, or whatever, whichever flow you now you'll be in the long range. You'll be able to, you've got a feint, bridge, long, throw your kickboxing attacks, and then, land those attacks so that you get the second bridge to wrestle, right? So it's interesting. The wrestler now has, more challenge. He's got to cross two bridges. He's got to close. He's got to get the person to feint to initiate, to get in to the ability to land his strikes, and then he has to sort of close the gap between landing his straight punches or kicks, and then get to the hips. So it's a very interesting thing, and I'm really interested in the ways, and I've been now sort of talking to people members of the martial arts community that I've been known for many years, but haven't really relied on their technical abilities. But I've been reaching out to them recently and talking about the blitzes and the way that they use full contact karate style, or the shido, or the Shotokan, stepping and blitz maneuvers, how they come in, looking at take it. It's interesting that one of these guys, Lyoto Machida, had such what we'd call it an unorthodox style at that part, and I think we had sort of dismissed many of his techniques as, oh, he's a karate guy, and we're not. I'm a Muay Thai guy, and I'm not going to learn karate because that's a different. It doesn't align with anything else I'm doing or any of my other training partners. So it's not something. It's a fluke rather than the rule. Now we're blending these words with the range, and it's interesting to see now how we can sort of apply some of the lessons and take what they're doing in this world and make these things meet. How do we use their feints and freezes and hip shifts and switches on the outside to get these attacks, to get these new angles, and to get these blitzes and these kind of chained combinations that flow in, land strikes, get reactions. It's very cool. So when talking about that range, now immediately I'll kind of segue in. You talk about your hands, the guard, and why are the hands so extended? Think about this, and I'll bring this back. This goes back to the gloves. If your hands if your elbows are glued to your ribs and your hands are pulled up into a shell or a peekaboo defense, there's that for me as someone with wrestling in my background, that is a gift. Thank you. You've almost assured me that I can get close enough to wrestle you. Excuse me. Now, I guess this is a good time to point out that no guard is just like a lone figure. You don't always have one guard. There are times, just in the timeliness, watching Josh Emmett and Calvin Cater, that there were times that you'll play long, and then there will be times maybe you're on the receiving end or you're moving away from pressure, in which you'll shell your hands as you move your feet, right? So don't ever assume that you'll play one guard and and dismiss all the others, right? But I would say as your primary guard, the shell is probably the weakest single guard in MMA for the nature of its lack of range control. With a guard that close, with my elbows that tight, you have no pressure, no reaction from for you closing up to me. And I would say also, take into context, any kind of shell guard often relies on the big boxing gloves. Your particularly just thinking our training environment, our big 16-ounce gloves, or maybe your smaller 14-ounce gloves. And those big puffy pads, those provide those fill in a lot of voids in a shell that go away when you're fighting MMA. So if you're back to the context of MMA, if you're fighting MMA and you are coming and you are here with a shell, there are so many gaps that small gloves can get through, and the ability to you can't really control the range. I can get to you now and easily put a shoulder into your gut now, grab your legs, get to your hips, and there's not much you can do now to keep me out. The long guard, knuckle to knuckle on the outside, using the long guard helps me. It's distance control. I can use that. I can stuff your shoulder. If I see you swinging a hook, I can easily parry or catch. I can stuff the inside of your tricep. I can post on your head. I can give you a shove. I can get a collar tie. If I want to strike and then move into throw elbows, throw knees, get into my clinch with extended hands, I can get a collar tie. I can hook my elbows in. I'm sort of making flinchy motions because I'm thinking about all the ways or all the benefits. But a long guard is a much more useful guard in MMA. So that's definitely one you want. It just has more tools available. You're able to, with your elbows extended. Now, if you need to pummel your hands in, if you crash in, maybe you put your elbow on somebody's chest. Now you can bury your head, get your head in their collarbone, pummel in for a body lock. Many more tools that come from the extension. And this is definitely something you're going to see. You mentioned southpaws. Well, naturally, in a game of orthodox versus southpaws, you're going to see that anyways, that touch reach aspect, because an orthodox and a southpaw person are often both trying to find the feint or fake that's going to allow them to get the outside angle to throw their inside straight. So as orthodox, I'm throwing straight right, southpaw throwing his straight left, down the middle, right, trying to sort of split the uprights. So we're trying to find that line. So we tend to mix the hand touching with our footwork. And then the second thing you're going to do, or you start talking about, hand pummeling, hand fighting, is that when you're moving in and out and you're touching, you're sort of playing the patty cake. You are trying to find the other person's timing and their rhythm, and you're trying to capitalize, either break that, disrupt that, or feint them into throwing when you're ready to parry or counter. So there's a lot of tricks and traps that are being played in there when you're trying to sort of mute each other's hand touch. So trying to think of some classic fights. You mentioned Conor, obviously, as a very, very good, very classic iconic southpaw fighter. I'm thinking of particular, and please put this in the comments if you have got a better MMA memory than I do. I believe it was Rashad Evans and was it John Jones, who were sort of back and forth for most of their match on their striking. We're playing a very interesting game here of sort of meeting and checking, and then looking for skip elbows over the top when their hands would meet. When they could get sort of the top hand slap parry, they would then once they could sort of get the timing right on that, they were coming over the top with elbows and then entering in with rear uppercuts and rear hooks. So very, very interesting how those things play out. So hopefully that answers the second part of that question. Winning the hand fighting games is getting your timing right. So knowing how to get the other person. This is I think of my judo when I think of like what skill that this getting the timing right, because often in judo you try to get in sync with the other person's footsteps so that you can then disrupt their footsteps. And this is sort of applicable with exactly what you're saying with the hand fighting here. So as you step in and out into range, and you sort of establish the rhythm, practice breaking those rhythms and disrupting the rhythms to counter, you'll have a lot of fun. So thank you, Yoel Romero nephew. Great questions, and awesome to see that the game is continuing to develop, and there's new things that we're all learning and trying to figure out here as we move on, as far as coaches and fighters. Okay, here we go. In what Mr. Yeet won? I love that word, yeet. That's hilarious. It also makes me, speaking of judo, there's a few things that give me greater happiness than yeeting somebody through the air. So in what order, Mr. Yeet One asks, in what order do you think the best martial art there is to know when starting? The answer is both obvious but also a little nuanced for me. in that, here's my answer: wrestling. Um, if you are, particularly if you are in the United States, particularly if you are under the age of 18, get into your school's wrestling program as soon as possible. Um, the physical conditioning, the mental conditioning, the team training atmosphere, the physical development, the technical skills you will learn, the sense of base and balance, of weight transfer, of dealing with a resisting person in an environment that will, in the long term, not be detrimental to your brain health, like getting punched in the head. Let's be honest, or to your limbs, in like getting armbarred or heel hooked, or your shoulders torn up, like jujitsu. There is wrestling is the art of control, of taking a resisting person down to the ground and pinning them on their back. Those skills have a tremendous, seems obvious to me, but hopefully they're obvious to you too, a tremendous value to combat sports, particularly MMA. And that is one you should definitely try to capitalize on if you have the ability. And that's the one you should, I think, start with. If I could um, uh, recommend one, get into wrestling. And if you're outside of the United States and you're looking for alternatives, I would say get into judo. You may think that the jacket is a sport specific tool that doesn't apply to MMA, and I would say yes, you're definitely right. You're not wrong about that, and that the rules of modern judo have definitely changed the game. Back in my time of training the sport of judo, we were allowed to do leg grabs, so singles and doubles, and those things were common. Now they're not, but the aspects of grappling, of hip throws, of takedowns and pins are excellent. And when you can do those things when you're young, when you can develop those skills of balance and base and coordination with grappling, I think they'll have tremendous carryover. And regardless if your next sport following those is now to learn a striking tool like boxing or kickboxing, I think you'll find very applicable. Your athleticism that you built in wrestling, the conditioning, the mental toughness will all carry over. And those that take judo, I think, will find a lot of love and a lot of fun in the clinch of Muay Thai. So if you happen to start in judo and then go into Muay Thai, you'll have a blast because there's a lot of commonality and a lot of cool judo things that are Muay Thai legal. Sometimes some of the Muay Thai folks or wrestlers have a problem, like the inside trips, the oji kojis. Some of those things are illegal. Of course, no big hip throws, but there are many throws and many sweeps and trips of Muay Thai clinch that are judo tech, or very, as I would say, asimilar as possible, and that'll allow you to be able to use that subset together. So that'll give you a bonus if you come from a judo background. You learn how to strike and punch, and now you're involved in the clinch. You'll be able to throw knees and then throw your sasai and throw your sweeps, or throw your hip blocks very, very easily. So lots of fun. Okay. All right. And here's the last question from Reddit. Psychological Emu 287 asks, what's the best martial art for fighting? What's the best martial art or fighting discipline best for street fighting? My father says jiu-jitsu, and I'd like to know your thoughts. Thank you. Street fighting. Man, that brings up, that's a complicated issue, and that's a vague issue. I've probably been on the martial arts, MMA, combat sports message boards since since probably back when I was started training Sanshao kickboxing. Maybe not when I started, but certainly by the time I finished my career in '99. Um, and certainly before I got involved in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and mixed martial arts, um, the topic of street fighting and what do you need to be a good street fighter. Um, um, Coincidentally, today's Father's Day, so I wouldn't be a very good dad if I didn't say you shouldn't be street fighting. so, um, and that brings up, I guess, um, thoughts. I guess one, when you say street fighting, I think of that maybe your thought or maybe what you're asking about is different than self defense, right? Or maybe what your father said is self defense. Um, and obviously, we saw in certainly in my generation when jiu-jitsu was a huge influencer on or changing the perceptions of what we thought about fighting. Um, is that how many times have we heard that all fights go to the ground, right? And understanding that control and grappling and ground control is a critical aspect of a one-on-one fight. And clearly, I'm a believer of that. I'm somebody who probably 6 days of my week I practice Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. It is a tremendous martial art. But when you say street fighting, I don't think of the context of a street fighting as a fair mano y mano. Let's sort our business. I think of when you say street fighting, it's a group of people that I may get into. I may have entered this getting sucker punched. I may have been I may get jumped. I may get kicked. So going down to the ground is probably the last thing I want to do in a fight where I can't control the environment. Thunder's coming in now, so we're getting some lightning thunder here. Just the element of uncertainty there it creates an aspect where, despite my knowledge of jujitsu, I would be hesitant to say, "Oh, jujitsu solves everything, cures cancer." That's the single martial art you should take to if you have problems with street fights. I would recommend that again avoid street fights because you don't know what you don't know what you don't know, the unexpected, the rules. There aren't any rules. What if they pull out what you think is a fair fight, or maybe even favorable to you? The minute it turns unfavorable for your friends, for your opponent, what if his friends start jumping in? What if they start pulling out weapons? What if what you thought was going to be an unarmed combat situation is not, and you get stabbed, or you get shot, or something terrible happens, or improvisational kind of weapons come up. There's too many very very dangerous, very complicated scenarios that can come up from street fighting. So, given that, and you talk about unarmed combat, I'm going to tell you to MMA, because to me that MMA provides the best common answers to many of these situations. Do you need to take somebody down to the ground to control them? You can wrestle and clinch. Do you need to stand up and strike? You can stand up and strike. Are you pinned up against a car or a wall or a door or a corner, an alley? Cage fighting, clinch fighting teaches you some very important skills there. Maybe you got tripped. Maybe you fell over a curb. Maybe you're down on a street gutter and you need to get back up to your feet. MMA has that ability. So just based on the fact that we cover the broadest sense of unarmed fighting, of combat fighting in an environment, at least a safe environment that you can practice week in, week out, and cover a broad sense of scenarios that may happen to you in an unarmed street fight. That would be my recommendation. Um, so street fighting is ugly. Do what you can to evade it, and don't forget to let your ego to take you out. Don't um, pause here, trying to formulate my ideas. Don't let your ego get you into scenarios that could be continue. It could be tremendously life altering and affect the rest of your life. Um, I've heard some horror stories about a friend of mine that saw a fight where he got into a street where a friend of his, I should say, an associate of his that he worked with, got into a fight at a bar and knocked out somebody in the fight, and that person didn't wake up, and of course went in, and that person was in a coma, and life altering events transpired following that encounter. So a lot of things are to be said about the consequences of what street fights could mean. So please think about those. And sometimes let your ego cool off or get you out of the situation. Always better to save the fighting for the mats, for the gym. Okay. All right, folks. I think we are down. Here we are. Yes, that concludes all of the events for Reddit. So thank you guys. Thanks to MMA Academy for asking the awesome questions. Final question. Then no surprise for me, although I should check my phone here. Okay. Yep. So my friend and former MMA student Peter Lee asked a question on Facebook, and of course Peter asked me a question that's very complicated to answer. What's something bad that many MMA professionals do consistently? Why? Okay, um, Peter, that's kind of tough. It's a little bit hard to answer, right? I think of what's something if you are particularly a modern professional MMA fighter, um, there are you're probably doing a lot of things right to have success in this sport at this time. I don't think it's ever been higher. I don't think it's ever taken a level of commitment and a level of professionalism that the sport has gotten to in the past few years, and that's all of these things are major pluses for me. The sport, the level of professionalism, athleticism, of training, of skill training, of uh, cohesive and holistic training has really picked up, and so we are into this. So um, one of the things that I would say to you right now, I guess one area in particular um, that I think um, many, when you say professional, I'm going to say that this is probably applies to what I would say your early professional, your people who are transitioning out of the amateur stage, who have achieved some success and have achieved enough to continue what they're doing, and now have seeken to, or have chosen to uh, uh, become a career as a fighter. Um, One of the things that they probably do consistently, or the things that I see that they consistently do, is that they hire strength and conditioning professionals outside of this world. They go and hire um, uh, people that they know, or not necessarily people that they know. Excuse me. Um, People in their local community or at their local gym who have experience in powerlifting or aesthetic training or other sports, and they hire them as their strength and conditioning coaches. And that part I see as a major um, problem in that if your strength coach doesn't understand uh, combat sports. I don't really believe that what they can do will provide major benefit for you. I don't think if you are if you're a power lifter and you see the world through the gym, and you don't think that you don't understand the importance or the intensity that the fighter's skill training has over their workload, their week, their central nervous system, their life, their ability to recover from what you're doing for them and things. And as a result, you are trying to increase, or you're trying to change the factors that you can control, which is usually the number, what they can deadlift or what they can squat. And you think of that as the idea of success. So you over the course of a 8-week period training cycle, you get 40 pounds. You add 40 pounds to somebody's squat over a short period, and that doesn't have has almost no translation to the person's performance. In fact, those 40 pounds probably did was in the last month probably made them sore than ever. Probably took them. They probably had to take many more days off to recovery because their central nervous system was fried. When they were in class, they weren't able to perform as well. Maybe they had, because of strain on their back, they were limited, or in certain situations. I guess there is no. What I'm trying to say is that there isn't much of a transferal. Strength coaches often don't understand that for combat sports, we often see strength and conditioning as tools needed to support what we do on the mats. So much like I would say NFL strength coaches or basketball strength coaches who are working with athletes. And they're really making sure that they're strong enough to play their sport, that they're on, that they're Joel Jameson is one of the people I think that had mentioned this to me, that he was working with early in his career as a strength coach. He was working with linemen, the Seattle Seahawks, and he was really blown away by how little they were lifting heavy, and their idea was. And what he had kind of learned through that was that, like, they made it to the big show. They're not lifting for the combine anymore. They made it to the big time. Now they're lifting essentially to maintain a level of strength to allow them to continue to train every week and get ready for games on Sunday. And I thought, I wish that most MMA people could find strength and conditioning coaches who could see that role in the holistic athlete's view, rather than just see what they're able to do, that for how they're able to just increase their performance in the fitness gym, rather to see the holistic view of the athlete's workload. I think it's getting better, though. I think as jiu-jitsu gets more popular, I think as there is a better and higher quality level of strength and conditioning for combat sports. I think the UFC Performance Institute and their release of some documentation and educational information is coming out. I believe this is getting better. So, but if you ask me, it's something I don't know that it's necessarily translating down to the local level. I still think when you are looking sort of, location geocentric, East Coast, Southern, Northeast, kind of, you're looking at the MMA fighters starting their careers. I don't know that many of them who are beginning their careers are doing the best things they can. I see too often they're receiving injuries, or they are receiving focus, or their training has been delayed or disrupted because they were trying to recover from killer workouts in the weight room. And I look at the people and I think, well, you're not understrong. Like your strength wasn't a limiting factor for you now. Like you were strong enough to apply all of the skills that you needed to apply for MMA. Why were you spending so much energy, and why were you risking injury in the weight room here? So just realized I got a little bit of a darkness. My screen suddenly went darker. I don't know if I've achieved some maximum time limit. Although I have been here for a minute and 43 seconds, probably certainly long enough. So maybe that's my segue. Maybe that's time for me to cut out of here. So Pete, I hope I asked your question or answered your question. It's a tough one, um, um, but that's it. Okay, folks, that's it. That's going to be a wrap for me. So I'm going to try to get out of here, go about my day. It's starting to rain here now, so maybe the noise is a factor as well. So, okay, folks. Well, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed this. If you like this, please leave me a comment, and I will try to get these. I'll try to do this much shorter and much more regular in the future. Try to answer any more questions, and maybe we can do some specific questions. Maybe we can open it up to some jujitsu specific or MMA striking specific. Talk a little bit more about these things. And Yoel Romero nephew, maybe we can talk a little bit more. Maybe do a video or two talking about specifics of the range, the modern MMA range in the guard, and some of the considerations there, and some of the ideas there. I can put that out visually for you to see as well. So thanks everybody. Take care. Hope you have a great day.